Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to go through a comprehensive guide for one of the best decks in the standard format at the moment, and that is Bastion Accord. The one difference that Bastion doesn't have in the English format at the moment, where in the Japanese format it does, is a new PR called Sapient Owl. But as of set 13, the Owl will be available for the English format, and this deck will kind of carry on its, I guess, dominance or its strength come the set 13 format. And I think it's a very valuable deck and probably some valuable information for you guys to learn how this deck kind of works, some of the budget options, and how to essentially construct the deck and play through the deck itself. If you guys need any coaching, feel free to hit me up on Metafy. My link is in the bottom right hand corner. Feel free to book a session and we can get started. Also, for any of you guys who haven't done it already, click that subscribe button, subscribe and get all the notifications for any new videos that I release on this channel. So going through the list, Bastion Accord surprisingly is very, very flexible, and flexible in a way where a lot of the core cards, actually there's very minimal core cards, right? And then you can kind of run different alignments of, I guess, grade 3s and stuff like that. But anyways, I'll go through it anyways, just so that you guys can kind of see. This is kind of my trial deck, well, I guess deck in testing. For Bastion, if you guys want to run it, the deck code is A for Alpha, J for Juliet, Q for Quebec 1, so AJQ1. So starting off, we play for Bastion Accord, one of the best cards, if not the best card released for Bastion. Essentially allows you to restand, and it doesn't matter on what you drive check. You restand a rear guard, and then you counterblast 1, discard a Bastion, and that rear guard gains drive check. So yeah, play 4 copies because it's the mainstay of the deck, the main grade 3 of the deck, and then you're running the Bastion line. Now, this Bastion line is actually a bit questionable. I know that there are some decks that run the Phantom Blaster line, so you play Wingle or Full Bow, and then you play the grade 1 Marin or the grade 1, whatever the grade 1 is for PBO, and you play Blaster Dark. And the idea of that is pretty much the grade 1 allows you to call a card when it's ridden over, or I think when it rides you call like the starter or something, and then the grade 2, when your opponent attacks you, gives you 1 counterblast. You can then counterblast 1, retire the unit that you call to get Twin Drive. Now the reason why I don't like that is it's reliant on the fact that you have to take a damage in the early game, and I'll be real, taking damage in the early game where you can just drop a 15 for no pass or OT to pass is so much more valuable than, I guess, taking the 1 damage and being susceptible to a crit. Pretty much if your opponent hits a crit in the early game, you're pretty much screwed, right? Your tempo, like, it shifts in their favor, and that's not what you want, right? I'm okay with just having, you know, a top check to, I guess, call a grade 0 even as a booster. The good thing about that is that if you put the booster behind the Vanguard, it attacks for 15 and your opponent can't just, you know, drop a 15 to guard it. But also, you know, if you somehow luck sack into one of your other grade 3s, it's a mainstay on the field. It doesn't actually get rid of itself unless your opponent plays any spot retires. So that's that, and hence why we are playing the Bastion line. Again, you can experiment with different ride lines as well. I know that there has been results for different ride lines, and I think, you know, all ride lines, as long as you have a reason to play it, they're all kind of valid. Now the next card that we're going to, I guess, play in the deck is Bastion Prime. Now, Bastion Prime primarily is in there for the name. There are times where you do ride into it and then you just finish your opponent, because essentially you check a 3, you restand all your grade 3 rear guards, and then they each gain +10, and the power is just really, really strong, right? Front row plus 2k isn't that very impactful, I guess. Maybe you change like 26 to 28. Actually, that is pretty impactful, right? So 13, 13, 26, 26 plus 2, 28 hits numbers, but mainly, you know, used for the Bastion name to discard with Bastion Accord, and then you ride into this if you know, end up, you know, getting to a position where you're about to win, right? The next new card that Bastion got is Grandeur's Edge Dragon, probably one of the best cards in Bastion Accord of Bastion itself. This card, when you reveal for the ability of your ride line, it counts as 2 cards. So pretty much you have this 1 card, you show it on grade 1 like singularly, and you get a top check call. Second time around, you chose this and another grade 3, you draw 1, right? But the main, I guess, benefit of this card is that it is a 23k attacker permanently, as long as you have a Bastion Vanguard, and against 10k shield, right? So this card in hand makes sure that, I guess, all your other stuff, all your other grade 3s are compensated for its shield, because obviously none of the other grade 3s that you run has shield anyways. But also having this as a 23k along with Bastion Accord's inherent plus 5k to the front row makes it a solo 28k attacker. And if you're playing a deck that doesn't run the fronts, essentially a 2-card guard each time you attack with that grade 3. Very, very impactful. 28 without Persona Ride, and then you jump to a 38 on a Persona Ride. Pretty stupid. So yeah, that's that. Now, I guess I'll jump to Alden first before I talk about the other ones. Alden is your main advantage engine. Pretty much you call it to regard canvas 2, solace 1, call a grade 3, draw 2, and then each time, I guess, it attacks and it stacks during your turn and gains plus 5. Yeah, this card has been Alden, Bastion's like best friend for the longest time now, and yeah, it's not getting replaced. There are some other cards that I guess you could play on top of this, but I think Alden is just too good to essentially get rid of. Alright, the remaining grade 3 units that I decided to run. So I play 3 of the Sages. So essentially it's a 10k, plus 10k, plus 10k shield if your opponent hit a defensive. And then when it attacks, you can look at the top card of your deck and leave it on top or put it into soul. The benefit of that is, hey, look, it's not a trigger. You put it into soul and then hopefully the next card is a trigger, right? But actually, it actually serves a more beneficial purpose in Bastion, and that is the fact that it generates soul. Soul in this deck is actually pretty annoying, especially if you have to like chain multiple Aldens, and that's kind of like the only way you generate advantage, right? If you run out of soul, you're kind of screwed, yeah? But, you know, checking the top card, seeing if it's a trigger is actually very, very strong. And to top that off, you know, when you attack, if your opponent gets a defensive, they're on 23. This is a 23k base if your opponent hits a defensive. And then you counterblast 1, you essentially increase this by 23k. Yeah, which is pretty nuts, yeah? So yeah, that's Sages. We also play Rondalia, which is essentially a Dark Strain Dragon, kind of. So essentially, if you have a Bastion Vanguard, you can put this into Soul, and then your Vanguard gets the ability that all of your grade 3s gain boost, which means that any other grade 3s that come out after you use this effect works as well. And then while it's in Soul, you can put this into Drop, and then choose one of your grade 3 rearguards, and then you give that one singular unit boost. So yeah, multi-purpose grade 3. You can run Dark Strain if, you know, you play a higher count of Sages. That means that you have more soul, but this deck is running out of soul, you know, already, with the fact that you have to keep chaining Aldens for your advantage. So yeah, you know, you kind of just want to keep it there, shove Rondalia into soul, and then yeah, you can kind of keep it there, or, you know, discard it if you want certain regards to have boost, right? And then the last card that we run as a unit is Bastion itself. So the Trideck Bastion, the fact that you have Bastion names for Accord, you can't just purely rely on Prime as well as the 3 Persona Ride, because you obviously want to Persona Ride multiple times during the game. So just having more Bastions, more targets to be able to discard using Accord is, you know, a good thing, right? We play 4 of the grade 1 PGs. We do not play the Sanctitude. 2 reasons. At the moment, the Sanctitude is only really good into Jet, really, and any like Battle Door, maybe Greedon, but I don't think that's like good anyways. So the fact that, you know, you can just call this off of your grade 1 skills, so, you know, you don't just check your Elementary and feel bad, right? So you just call that as a 6k booster. Pretty happy with that. But I mean, again, you also do run Forbidol Surrogate as well as your Chosen Knight's Order. So the more orders means the more likely that your grade 1 will whiff, right? So yeah, just speaking on Forbidol, Forbidol allows you to get a grade 3 and or grade 4 with different names. Call them if they're grade 3, grade 4, add them to hand. So the good thing about that is that you call your Grandeur Edge Dragon onto rearguard as well as your Prime. Alternatively, you could also call your Alden. You know, you have your resources, play on rearguard, come up 2 + 1, call a grade 3 from your hand or 2. You know, very, very good card. But the fact that you get a Bastion into hand, that is very, very impactful. Ditch it for Bastion Accord and then start drive checking. Then you play 3 of the Chosen Knight Order. Play for CB1 Soul Blast 1. Again, another card that uses Soul Blast. So, you know, Sages has more of, I guess, a role in this deck. So you play it based on how many grade 3 units you have on the board, inclusive of your Vanguard. So if you have 2 or more, choose one of your units, gains +5. This means that you can start bumping up, I guess, 23k attackers to 28k attackers, which means that it's asking for 2 cards if your opponent doesn't run fronts. 3 or more, draw card. 4 or more, choose one of your Vanguard, and it gains drive +1. Drive +1 just means that you have more, I guess, reliability to hit the stuff that you want. If you don't have a Bastion in hand, then, you know, 1 extra chance to get a Bastion. Now, we talk about this Sapient Owl and how this kind of fits into this list. And like I said, you know, why is this list so flexible? Is that Sages, Rondalia, and the grade 3 Bastion itself, even Bastion Prime, is kind of like not set in stone. The only cards that are set in stone are the 4 Bastion Accord, the 4 Grandeur Edge, and the 4 Alden. So Prime, the 2 other Bastions and Rondalia and Sages, you can kind of mix and match the numbers. If these cards get super expensive, like the Sages I know is very expensive. There are other cards like the Alden Light. I don't remember its name. I think it's... Don't remember its name. Yeah, this guy. Hanetaria. So essentially, if you place it on rearguard, if you have a Bastion Vanguard, come up 1, call one of your grade 3s from hand, and then if you called one and you have 5 or more units, you draw 1. And then during your turn, if you have 6 or more units, this unit gets boost. So that's an alternative to Sages, but then again, Sages allows you to get the soul that Sapient Owl doesn't give, because obviously we don't have access to the PR yet, right? When Sapient Owl does come out, then obviously Sages and or Rondalia will come out for Sapient Owl. Another, I guess, alternative, I think I mentioned it before, was Darkstrain Dragon. If you want to play Darkstrain, you obviously take out the Rondalia, but you need another way to, I guess, generate the soul, because you will be chewing through soul quite a bit in this deck. And then another card that I think some people do run is the Carbuncle. And the Carbuncle, I think, you return 2 cards that were from the ride line back, and then you top 5, call 1. So call a grade 3 or less. You know, that's kind of what you want, right? If you, I guess, call it during any phase that isn't main phase, then you call it as rest, but you're going to be calling it during the main phase. And the fact that it's a 20k shield, pretty good, right? So yeah, those are some of the alternatives. Just going through the triggers now. So we play 8 crit, 3 draw, 4 heals. Obviously, heals are based more on the metagame. And if you're, you know, let's just say you're playing a locals or a regional that is filled with like crit inherent Vanguard, so to say, you might want to put in crit heals. But I think the fact that you have access to just 15k heals in the early game, you can just drop it for no pass or OT pass. It just feels really good. And then you also play the blue OT. The reason why we play the blue OT is that if you do hit the Keto OT at the later stage in the game, you pretty much auto lose because you deck out, right? The good thing about the blue OT is that it can pick up a Bastion from your discard back to hand. It can pick up an Alden. It can pick up a Prime that you discarded like earlier on and you really need it to finish the game. If you hit that, you get that Prime back. You get PGs back. There's just a lot of, like, I guess, utility with this card and I guess you can just grab essentially what you want from the bin back into a hand. Now, if you don't have the blue OT, I know it's like significantly expensive. You could also experiment with the red OT. That again is a pretty pricey over trigger. And then if you don't have that, then you know, just play the Keto one. Keto one's fine. And then if you're really concerned about decking out, then you can play the Crate one. But to be honest, you can just play with whatever OT. OT is OT. The main part of it is the 100 million. But yeah, you know, if you want to play this at a regional level and you need to get access to the best cards available, blue OT is the way to go. So yeah, the last talking point is the draws. You can play draws. I think draws allows you to like draw into your PGs where Alden wouldn't be able to draw you into your stuff. And also because you're running such like low shield value cards, sometimes the draw hits you into a 15k and it feels really good. So yeah, that's like another good talking point for draws versus fronts. Just kind of how you guys like it. If you know you test and you find that fronts are more impactful because you're playing a more fast-paced game and not something that, you know, you get to turn 4, turn 5, or potentially even turn 6, then you might want to play fronts because then the game just kind of ends quickly and finishes quickly. So yeah, that's pretty much the deck. Now I'm just going to jump to CFA, and this is kind of like a different way or approach that I'm going to do these comprehensive profiles for the meantime. I'm just going to discuss a little bit on what you should be keeping in your mulligans. So Grandeur Edge, I think I explained it before, the fact that you have it in hand just means that, you know, you have access to 2 grade 3s to show in your ride line, and then you also want an Alden, so you can draw into your pieces in the early game, and I think that's really important. If you don't hit the Alden, then you're kind of screwed. Your tempo, the card advantage that you get is like slowed down drastically, and that's not what you want. So we're gonna return these back to deck, just kind of shuffle, and then mulligan our hand, just kind of play through a few of the first few turns, just to kind of see how the deck kind of works, and then essentially see what we return. So I'm just gonna draw my 5, obviously return the OT, the heal here, probably the PG as well. Bastion Accord's alright, you know, you want the Persona ride, so I guess Bastion Accord can stay. Bastion Prime, you know, we're gonna draw into our Bastions later anyways, and then redraw our 4. Okay, so this is pretty bad. You know, 3 Bastion Accord is probably not the best grade 3 or card to have in hand at the moment, but you know, it is what it is, right? Draw for turn. This hand is like not great, so I'll just discard the Bastion Accord and ride. 2 more, I guess, for whatever lies later on, which is fine. So, you know, you drop a 15k because you're guarding their first solo Vanguard attack. Stand and draw again. Rondalia, it's not great, but I guess like you're not gonna have much of a front row, back row anyways. So you can ditch the Rondalia, ride this. You know, you show your Grandeur Edge, look at the top card. Oh, it's a crit. Usually this happens a lot. So if you place it behind the Vanguard, then it's for 15. Your opponent can't just 15 it for no pass. So you drive check a Grandeur Edge. Pretty good. Your opponent takes damage. And in this case, it's pretty hard to guard. You're probably going to get sent to 2. Sending to 2 is fine, especially if you see an Alden. So I'm going to take 1, take the PG, take 1, the Rondalia, call it a day, then attack 2 lines, stand and draw. So here it's a little bit hard, just because we don't have access to an Alden, and yeah, it doesn't feel very good. So you kind of want to keep the Bastion, especially if you want to use Bastion Accord's skill. We're going to recoup it back anyways, because the Bastion Accord essentially gives my rear guard drive check. So I'm going to ditch the crit, ride this, obviously show the one that you showed before, and this was drive checked. So yeah, we'll draw a card. Okay, we don't have an Alden, which is not the greatest situation, but you know, you just drop the Grandeur, and then these are like 28k, because the Bastion gives the front row rear guards +5, and essentially it has protection. So in the Gandiva matchup, your opponent can only retire the back row, and if you don't have a back row, then they're not retiring anything. So that means that, you know, Best Harvest is useless, completely useless. And if you're playing against Gandiva, you just play front row, and that's pretty much it, right? So we're gonna head to the battle phase, attack 1, attack 2, and then Bastion Accord is in the battle. So we're gonna do our drive check. So check 1, heal's pretty good. I guess you can bump the one that will have drive check. So we'll do that. Let's just say we healed, and then the second check's crit. That's pretty good. All right, so we put one, we'll split the triggers, and we'll put the crit on the one that drive checks, make that as pressurizing as possible. And then skill, you know, end of battle, restand. Callous 1, discard a Bastion, a card with the Bastion name, discard it, and that grade 3 gains drive check. So this is 38 with crit. Now it has twin drive. So check 1, check 2, crit. This is pretty good. And then now suddenly this rearguard is a 48k with crit, and yeah, we went first, right? Very impactful deck in, I guess, the whole scheme of things. If you get something like this in the opening turns, it's pretty gross, right? You're on 1 damage, you can take 5, you have a pretty solid hand, you haven't even seen Olin yet, and that's just pretty much how the game, or the sequencing of Bastion Accord kind of goes. Now let's talk about how this deck kind of plays into the metagame at the moment. Obviously, we do have Gandiva and Willista still, you know, the best decks for the BCS format at the moment. Obviously, this is another deck that a lot of people will start picking up because it's a fan favorite. We also have Orphis Mask. So this deck, like I said before, if you're playing against Gandiva, just play front row. Front row has protection. Best Harvest does nothing. None of their stuff does anything. And yeah, they don't draw cards. Well, then too bad, right? So yeah, this deck is actually a really good matchup into Gandiva. Against Willista, it might be a little bit hard, especially if Willista goes first and starts like rushing you. That's probably one of the weak points about this deck, is that the grade 1, the grade 2 turn is very lackluster. So if your opponent even puts a mild aggression on you, then your hand might just fall apart because, you know, you're holding a bunch of 3s. So Willista might be a little bit of a hard matchup, but sometimes you can just, you know, heal out of it with your 4 checks, 5 checks. So yeah, that's that. Orphis Mask. So Orphis Mask is multi-attack with big numbers, and if you guard correctly with this deck, then, you know, you can get through fine. If you go first, you're also doing fine. But yeah, sometimes your hand just gets very cloggy, and you really can't guard Orphis Mask. So yeah, I guess that's one thing to kind of think about. But yeah, I think the deck as a whole has a very good meta coverage across all of the decks in the standard format at the moment. And then, you know, once set 13 comes out, this deck is still good. We have access to Sapient Angel as well, so you're going to slot that back in, and the deck just kind of rolls by itself. So yeah, that's pretty much the comprehensive guide for Bastion Accord. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys liked the way that I did it this time with the CFA, I guess, explanation, the sequencing and that. I think it's a little bit easier, a little bit more clean cut to just kind of show you guys how things are laid out, how things are performed, and, you know, it's pretty easy, and everything, you know, is calculated in numbers that you can actually see, instead of me, you know, trying to rant out a bunch of numbers and just kind of go in circles, and you guys can kind of see it on the screen itself. If you guys like this video, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of this deck. Are you guys bringing it for BCS? I think this is an insane deck to bring to BCS, along with Orphis Mask and, you know, the 2 mainstays in the standard format at the moment, so Gandiva and Willista. There are some other decks as well. Greedon is popping up as of recent, but don't actually know how good Greedon would go into this and Orphis Mask. It might actually struggle a little bit. But yeah, again, if you guys haven't done it already, click subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.